How many of you heard about the fires in Hawaii? Now, my niece, she has a house right on Front Street. And not only does she have a house there, but her business is right there, so they're joined. And the fire started. Her husband says, "Hey, there's a fire, we got to get out." They grabbed their little dog, one or two things, and literally jumped in the car and drove out. And just as they drove out, the barriers were being put up and it trapped everybody. If they had delayed just a few minutes, they would have been one of the ones burned up in the cars that you saw on television. So we're all watching this unfold, and then we hear about all sorts of strange things, such as the water department being asked to increase the water pressure because everyone's trying to spray things down. I grew up out in the West where we have forest fires and stuff all the time. Man, you want to spray everything down, get it all damp, get it all wet right before the sparks get there. And there's no water pressure. And then 5 hours later, after the request, they turn on the water. And you're like going, what's that deal? Well, I started just kind of checking around because that's weird. Kaleo Manuel, the gentleman in the picture there, was responsible for making that decision. He's the deputy director of the state of Hawaii's Commission for Water Resource Management. And I want you to catch something with me. Worldview determines how people vote on policy, how people create policy, how people execute policy. I think there's a connection here. President Obama's foundation has a special page dedicated to him before the fire occurred. And this is what it says about him on that page. It says, he believes that ancient wisdom and traditional ecological knowledge of native peoples will help save the earth. Kaleo is passionate about elevating native and indigenous ways of knowing all aspects of spheres and discourse and dialogue. I want you to listen. Now, this was recorded before the fires. This was a couple of years ago, but it talks about an ideology. Why not turn the water on? That would be a question I would ask. Could it be your philosophy? Because he's going to talk about water as something that shouldn't be used, but something that should be worshiped. And this goes back to our cultural roots. Friends, you don't want to go back to your cultural roots. You want to go towards Jesus. Because if you go back to your cultural roots, the paganism of our cultural roots, and I mean every culture, it's wicked, immoral, godless, and evil. And that's why Jesus died. To save us from our sins and to save us from this sort of insanity. I want you to just listen to what he says, because everybody today, when you go to college, when you're listening on the news, it's about go back to your ancestors, go back to the worldviews of the past. These Christians have ruined everything. Really? Listen to this.
The commission is responsible, per our authorizing statute, to protect and manage all water resources in the state. One Water is like taking it and looking at it from a holistic system perspective. And that's not any different than how Hawaiians traditionally managed water. You know, in essence, Native Hawaiians treated water as one of the earthly manifestations of a god and a kua kane. And so that reverence for a resource and that reciprocity in relationship was something that was really, really important to our worldview and well-being, right? And living in an island, isolated from other, civilizations. And so I think where it shifted to today or over time is that we've become used to looking at water as like something which we use and not necessarily something that we revere as that thing that gives us life, right? I mean, to me, it's a shift in value set. If we can start to really look at how we as humans in an island can reconnect to that traditional value set. So really my motto is always like, let water connect us and not divide us. Like we can share it, but it requires true conversations about equity.
Water is not something to be used, but something to be worshiped. And we need to reconnect with the idea of worshiping water. That's exactly what he just said. Did that influence his decision? I don't know. But it would make sense. Friends, I just want to say this as clear as I can. You and I have to be very careful not to be seduced by a doctrine of demons today. And here's the doctrine: that your cultural roots are something you need to go back to. I'm serious. If you think about going, my family from Europe, you don't want to go back to the paganism pre-Jesus, the cultic practices that took place in Germany and in England and in other parts of, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that in Asia. If you're from Asia, you don't want to do that if you're from Africa. You don't want to do that if you're from the Philippines. I'm just telling you, you don't want to go back to paganism. You go back to paganism, the rope is only so long.